Hey there, and welcome into another episode of the Route 1 Rundown. If you eat, sleep, and breathe Maryland basketball, then this is the place for you. I'm your host, Steve Gorgie, and I'm thrilled to be back for another episode to talk some Terps. But before I dive into everything going on in College Park, just a reminder that this show is on YouTube and part of the Department of Hoops, a DMV media network. So if you're listening to the show in audio form, but you want to be watching it, you got to go and check us out on YouTube. It's youtube.com/@Department of Hoops. If you love local basketball, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, because you are going to love the Department of Hoops. So let's dive right into this thing, because I have a big show planned for you today. Maryland is set up for a big-time battle with Wisconsin on Wednesday night, and I'll be previewing that one. But first, we have to start with the Terps 2-0 road trip. Because as I said just a few seconds ago, I say it at the top of every show, if you eat, sleep, and breathe Maryland basketball, then this is the place for you. Well, if you eat, sleep, and breathe Maryland basketball, then you had a fantastic week as the Terps go 2-0. Because just a few days ago, it feels like just yesterday, the question everybody was asking, myself included, I asked it too on this very show, is why can't Maryland win on the road? Why can't they get the job done on the road in the Big Ten? Why can't they win these close games? Well, that's all over. That's all done. The Terps finally break the road skid, getting their first road win of the year. First, they bludgeon Illinois 91-70 before winning a 79-78 thriller over Indiana in Assembly Hall. So all of a sudden, the Terps look like road warriors, and the trajectory of the season really feels like it's completely different as the Terps now sit at number 19 in the net. They're 3-4 in quad one games. That was a huge talking point. In addition to that road record just a week ago was their lack of quad one wins. Now they're 3-4 in quad one games, and they sit in a three-way tie for fifth place in the Big Ten at 6-4 as we've reached the halfway point of the Big Ten season for Maryland. So let's get into that road trip. Let's get into some of the takeaways. My number one takeaway from that road trip, and really this pertains more to the Indiana game, was guards. Maryland has got some guards, because Maryland's guards were the difference in that Indiana game. Maryland's guards were better than Indiana's guards in that game, and it's the reason the Terps are able to pull out a really close victory in that one. Together, Jacoby Gillespie, Rodney Rice, and Selton Miguel combined for 56 points. And of course, Rodney Rice hits the game-winning three with just under 10 seconds to go in that game. Jacoby Gillespie made some big shots in that game. Selton Miguel came up with a big bucket with just a couple minutes to go on the fast break. He made a really big shot. All of those guys together combined for 56 points. And I really thought they were the reason that Maryland was able to get that win over Indiana in Assembly Hall. Look, I'm not going to sit here and just read the stats to you, but you think about the moments in that game. You think about what those guys did. And Jacoby Gillespie is a guy that over and over again has come up with big shots in big moments, and we're going to talk a lot more about him coming up here shortly. But in this Indiana game, there were some questionable shot selection maybe down the stretch as they were blowing this 10-point lead, as Indiana was extending it out to 5, but Indiana was up by 4 with just about 30 seconds to go, and Jacoby Gillespie did what he's been doing over the last month, is getting to the basket. He gets to the basket and he hits a big shot. On that game-winning shot by Rodney Rice. Of course, all the credit in the world to Rice. You've got to give Rodney Rice credit for a lot of things on that play. You got to give him credit for being involved, continuing to stay involved in the play, for moving, for looking for his shot. But I do give Jacoby Gillespie a lot of credit on that play too, because although he lost the ball under the basket, he could have possibly been called for a treble, he got to the basket. Him getting to the basket and the ball ultimately winding up in Julian Reese's hands, who got got the ball over to Rodney Rice, who hit that big shot. It all starts with Jacoby Gillespie and his ability to get to the basket. And I didn't think Indiana's guards could stay in front of him. I just didn't think they were capable of staying in front of Jacoby Gillespie. And you saw it on the big shot that he hit to get to the basket, to cut it to 2 with about 30 seconds to go. And you saw it on that game-winning shot where he gets penetration. It causes a commotion. It causes a collapse. And although he didn't hit a shot, although he almost traveled, he could have been called for a travel possibly, though he could have lost the ball, just him penetrating causes problems for the defense. Ultimately, it leads to Rodney Rice getting open, and then give Rice all the credit in the world for hitting the big shot. Rodney Rice, how much can you say about this guy, Rodney Rice, who, he didn't play much at all in his short time at Virginia Tech. And he's a guy who goes 5 for 7 from beyond the arc in Assembly Hall in a game that Indiana really, really had to have, and a game that Maryland had to have. He puts up 23 in this one, including that game winner. And everything they have asked of him, he has done at every turn. I could not be more impressed with Rodney Rice this season. And I think it's a big time credit, first off, to him, because it's not hard. It's not easy, I should say, to sit on the bench, to not be involved in the game of basketball in real game action for really a year plus, because he had injuries that first year at Virginia Tech. Even when he showed flashes, that's not easy to stay mentally sharp, to stay mentally ready and take advantage of the opportunity like this. So a huge credit to him, but also a huge credit has to go out to the coaching staff for being able to identify that he was a guy who had that in him, who he is a guy who they thought they could bring him in and unlock that. So I can't say enough about Rodney Rice as he hits the game winner against Indiana. And then Selton Miguel, he goes 3 of 6 from beyond the arc in this game. He puts up 15 points, and he hits a really big shot late in that game on the fast break. I thought Maryland's guards were the difference in this one. 56 points for those 3 guys, Gillespie, Rodney Rice, and Selton Miguel. So now let's talk about Jacoby Gillespie. Let's talk about him more, because I started off the last show by saying Jacoby Gillespie is a lead guard you can win with, that he is a lead dog, that he's the kind of guy that you can lean on in March, that you can lean on late in conference play and win with at a really high level. And that is all more true than ever. Jacoby Gillespie has been unbelievable over the last 6 games. He's averaging 18.5 points per game, 6.3 assists, 2.7 steals, and he's shooting just under 43% from deep. And then to add to all of that, to all of those great statistical numbers, he's just hit big shot after big shot after big shot. In the loss against Northwestern, he hits a shot late in regulation to tie it. He hits another late in overtime to tie it. Against Nebraska, in a tied ball game, he is able to get to the basket and give Maryland the go-ahead layup late in that game. And then against Indiana, the play I've already talked about, they're down 4. This game looks like it's just slipping away. 30 seconds to go, he gets to the basket. When you combine his ability to get to the basket, hit shots from beyond the arc, be an asset on the defensive end by the way he creates havoc with those steals, he is a guy that you really have to start considering for first team all Big Ten. I don't know who doesn't make it. There's a lot of good players in the Big Ten. We're still halfway. We still got half of the season to go, but halfway through this season, Jacoby Gillespie has to at least be in consideration to be first team all Big Ten, because he is a guy that is elevating his game in conference play. He's elevated his game over the past 6 games. He is the reason that this offense runs, and I think those assist numbers are really, really telling. 6.3 assists, and there were games earlier this year where he wasn't putting up assist numbers like that. There were some games where the assist numbers were maybe a little bit lacking. Jacoby Gillespie feels like he's a guy who is unbelievably confident in his game right now. He's confident in his ability to get to the basket. He's confident in his ability to hit hit threes from beyond the arc. He's confident in his ability to run the offense, to distribute the ball, and he trusts in his teammates, and it's really being reflected. 9 assists against Indiana, 8 assists against Illinois. This is a guy who is putting up now big-time assist numbers, and he's not turning the ball over a lot either. He has a very, very respectable assist-to-turnover ratio on the year at 4.7 assists to 1.7 turnovers. Jacoby Gillespie, at this point, he's the engine that runs this team. He's the guy that, you no doubt about it, want the ball in his hands in late game situations. And there's a very, very good reason for that, because he has delivered at almost every turn. And this was just another example of where he has delivered. Jacoby Gillespie is a guy who's playing like he's a first-team All-Big Ten guy. And that means to me, he's playing like a guy who you can absolutely make a run with. Whether that's winning the Big Ten tournament, whether that's getting to a second weekend and beyond in the NCAA tournament, if you have a guy like Jacoby Gillespie on your team who is your lead guard, I think the sky's the limit. So Jacoby Gillespie, he's been unbelievable for Maryland over the past 6 games in particular. Again, 18.5 points, 6.3 assists, 2.7 steals, and 42.9% from beyond the arc. Unbelievable for Jacoby Gillespie. Let's start the talk now about how he should be in consideration for first team All Big Ten. And now we can't talk about these 2 games, especially the Illinois game, without talking about the 2 big men. Because what I've been saying all year, what makes this team special to me, what makes me feel like this team is capable of more, is capable of making a run, whether that's in the conference tournament, whether that's in the NCAA tournament, whether that's just going on a great stretch down a great run down the stretch here to end Big Ten play. The reason I feel like this Maryland team is capable of beating anybody on any given night is because of the versatility, is because I can say to you that the 3 guards combined for 56 points against Indiana. Well, I can also say to you, against Illinois, it was the front court that stole the show, with Julian Reese and Derek Queen combining for 52 points and 23 rebounds in that game. And I want to separate it out a little bit too, because Julian Reese by himself had 27 points and 17 boards in that win against Illinois. And that was a game that Maryland, they bludgeoned Illinois. That's the verb I used, or that's the adjective I used rather, to describe that game. It was a bludgeoning. They stomped them. 91-70, a 21-point win. Now I'm just thinking in my head about whether that was a verb or adjective. Guess it depends how you use it. To bludgeon, it's a verb. It's a verb. It's a verb. Maryland bludgeoned Illinois. That was a verb. Anyway, on to more important things. Maryland stomped Illinois. It wasn't close. It was an impressive win for a team that just had question after question after question being asked. And for Julian Reese, like, how much can you say about Julian Reese? He's a guy who came in and has been at Maryland for 4 years, and he's gone through so much turnover and so much change over the course of those 4 years. He comes in as a really highly touted guy, and what was it? 10 games into his freshman season? 10 games into that 2021-2022 season or so, along those lines, 10 games or so into that season. I don't know the exact numbers off my head. Very early. Let's just put it this way. Before January of 2022, before January of his freshman season, the guy who recruited him to come to Maryland, the guy who was the head coach, was no longer the head coach. Decided he did not want to be the head coach anymore. Okay, so that's a massive change for anybody to go to over the course of their career. But then a new coach comes in. He decides to stay. He decides to stick it out, continue to play at Maryland. He has a really nice sophomore season. Grant Billmeyer is an assistant coach, a guy who is largely credited with being a great developer of bigs. Well, he gets a head coaching job. He bounces. He's out. last year was a disaster of a season for Maryland as a team. Julian Reese was good, but he had his own struggles last season, particularly with free throw shooting, which we are going to talk about in just a second here, because he has completely turned that around. Julian Reese could have gone a lot of places this offseason. Julian Reese, I'm sure, had a lot of offers to go elsewhere and contribute and play big minutes and play a big role and play on a team that was more guaranteed than Maryland was to be a real competitor this college basketball season. I can guarantee you there are a lot of programs out there that would have loved to add Julian Reese in the transfer portal this offseason and would have made it worth his while monetarily. Julian Reese stuck with Maryland. Julian Reese, in an era where people are transferring left and right, it's not uncommon, and no shade to anybody who does, but it is not uncommon to go to 3 schools in 4 years. I mean, look at a guy like Jay Young on Maryland, who is playing a big role on this team. He's been at UCF, Memphis, and Maryland. He's been all over the place. Jay Young is a guy who is well-traveled in the world of college basketball, and, that's not uncommon at all right now. Look at how transfers like Jacoby Gillespie are playing a huge role for this Maryland team. And Jay Young too, he spent time a few other places in addition to those schools. He was at Baton Rouge Community College. He was at Grambling State. He has been all over the place, and that is not uncommon. So for Julian Reese to stick it out, to just be a stalwart at Maryland over the course of these 4 years, I really view him as a program stabilizer, a guy like Walt Williams, who is so revered by anybody you talk to, who was around during those early Gary Williams years, and I wasn't old enough to be watching those games, knowing those teams, understanding what the situation was, but from everybody I trust who was, they talk about Walt Williams with such reverence. And that's how I feel in a lot of ways about Julian Reese. And he's really adding to his legacy right now. And that was a game against Illinois that was a legacy game for Julian Reese. He goes out there and he absolutely dominates. He dominates the Illini to the tune of 27 points and 17 boards. And then Derek Queen adds another 25. And you know what? Maryland did what they should have done in that game, because Illinois was without their big man, Tomislav Ivasic, who's been fantastic for them this year, the 7-footer from Croatia, and they were without him, and Maryland took it to them inside to the tune of 52 points between those two guys. And you got to give Derek Queen a lot of credit for that game too, because Derek Queen, and again, talk about asking questions. I was asking the question as well. Has Derek Queen hit a freshman wall? I was talking about, hey, I really want to see what Queen looks like after this Wisconsin game, after Maryland gets this full week off between Wisconsin and Ohio State. They play on Wednesday, January 29th. They don't have another game until February 6th. Let's see what Queen looks like down the stretch. Those were the questions I was asking. That was the conversation among the Maryland fan base. And Derek Queen said, okay, cool, I'm going to go put up 25. I'm going to be named Freshman of the Week in the Big Ten for the 3rd time. That is what makes this Maryland team special. The fact that on one given night, you can have those two bigs go off like they did, and another, it's the guards. It's the guards that come through. It's the guards, the 3 guards, the 3 transfer guards that go for 56 points. They all hit big shots in that game. That is what I think makes this Maryland team so special, and why I continue to be so excited about this team. Now, one more note on that Illinois game. Maryland was really good at forcing turnovers in the game. When you look at that game and you look at the box score, you'll look at the stats in that one. There's 2 big stats that really stands out, or 3 stats, I should say, that stand out. Maryland forced 16 turnovers. They outscored Illinois 17-3 in fast break points, 27-4 in points off turnovers, and I guess it's really 4 stats, 62-34 in points in the paint. I've said it once, I've said it a million times. Turnovers are critically important for this Maryland defense because in that Indiana game, there's a lot of positives to walk away with, and it's really easy coming off that win, and it was a big win, and it should be celebrated. But Maryland looked really good offensively in that game. I didn't think they looked great defensively, and part of that was the fact that they were only able to force a turnover on just over 11% of Indiana's possessions. When Maryland doesn't force turnovers, it can really cause problems. It can really make life difficult for them to get stops. And that was, I think, a huge difference between those two games. You look at that game against Indiana, and I thought the offense was far better than the defense in that one. And that's one of the concerns I do have going forward, is when Maryland doesn't get turnovers, doesn't force turnovers, can they buckle down and get stops? Because while I thought Maryland's guards were certainly better than Indiana's in that game, and I thought they were the difference that they won, Miles Rice, he hit some big shots in that game. And then in the front court, you have those guys, Ballo, Mbako, Renew. Those three guys had a nice game. They hit some big shots, especially Renew hit some big shots in that game. And it's something that I'm keeping my eye on. It's something that I'm watching for, because now when you look at Maryland's KenPom profile, the offense, for the first time all season that I have seen, is ranked ahead of the defense. Now, it's great that Maryland is top 25 in both metrics. They're number 19 in offensive efficiency, number 24 in defensive efficiency. I should have looked at this before the show, and I'll try to do it real quick in real time. There aren't a ton of teams that are top 25 in both metrics, so that's a good thing. Let's do it real time together here. Auburn, Alabama, not Kentucky, not Gonzaga, okay, so we got Auburn, Florida, Purdue, Duke, Houston, Iowa State, Arizona, who just got a big win over Iowa State last night, Maryland, Michigan State, and Illinois. That's it. Who did I name there that's not either a conference title or national title contender? I don't know if I don't know if there's a team there that you wouldn't say is in contention for a conference or national title. Maybe Arizona, just because Houston looks like they're going to kind of run away with the conference right now. But look, Houston's 8-0 in the Big 12. Arizona's 8-1. That's really, really good company for the Terps to be in, to have an offensive and defensive efficiency on KenPom of top 25 in each. But I do think that if I do have a concern, if I do have a worry, it is the defense. It is the defense right now, and that Indiana and Illinois games, I think, illustrate what Maryland looks like when they're really good defensively and forcing turnovers, and when they're not, how hard it can be for them to get stopped. So look, this was a great week. This is a trajectory-changing week for Maryland to go out and get 2 road wins. It makes you start thinking about, okay, can they finish top 4 in the Big Ten? Can they get that double bye in the Big Ten tournament? Could they be set up to win a Big Ten tournament? How high can they get seeded in the NCAA tournament? I think it could be as high as a 3 seed if everything breaks right. I think 3, 4, 5 are very, very, very much in play for Maryland, which gives them a great chance to go get to a Sweet 16. But when you start looking for flaws, to me, that's it. It's how does Maryland defend? How does Maryland get stops when they're not forcing turnovers? And I'll talk more about that later, because I think as we look ahead to the Wisconsin game, because I think that is one of the most important factors for this Maryland team when we really look ahead to the rest of the season. So let's get into that Wisconsin game, because it is a big one. The Terps take on the Badgers tomorrow night in Xfinity Center. It's a 7 p.m. tip, and it's the last game for Maryland before they have an entire week off. It's been a brutal schedule so far. Maryland will have played 11 Big Ten games, and they'll get a nice week off, a nice chance to get some rest and relaxation before going into that final 9-game stretch run. And I think it could really be a big opportunity for Maryland to fine-tune things to reach the level that we think they can achieve, we think they can get to, that we are hoping they can get to. So Wisconsin comes into this game, and Wisconsin has had a good season. Maryland's number 19 in the net, well, Wisconsin's number 18. Wisconsin's a half game ahead of the Terps for 4th in the conference. Wisconsin has just 3 Big Ten losses on the season by a combined 11 points. They come to Michigan, Illinois, and UCLA. This Wisconsin team is very, very good, sitting at 6-3 in the Big Ten. And this is a vastly different Wisconsin team than the one you're probably thinking of. It's not the slow, plodding, boring Wisconsin team. This is a Badgers team that can get up and go. This is a Badgers team that can absolutely score. Look no further than our last game. They're coming off an 83-55 win over Nebraska. And look, if you want some numbers around it, if you don't believe me, if you haven't watched Wisconsin, Wisconsin ranks 152nd nationally in adjusted tempo, which maybe that doesn't seem so special to you, given that Maryland sits at 75th right now. But coming into this season, Greg Gard had been the head man there for 9 years up in Madison. And only once had they finished better than 300 nationally in adjusted tempo. This is a Badgers team playing much faster than they ever have. And they are scoring too. They're averaging 82.5 points per game, and they're 8th in offensive efficiency per KenPom. They got a couple guys in John Tonje and John Blackwell who can absolutely light it up. Tonje is averaging 18 points per game, Blackwell 16.3, and they both can absolutely go off. Tonje's in his 6th year of college hoops, and he's dropped 41 points against Arizona, 33 versus Pitt, and he's coming off a 27-point effort against Nebraska. Well, Blackwell has put up 32 against Iowa, 28 against USC, and 23 in a loss to UCLA. I'm telling you, these two guys can absolutely go off. It's still Wisconsin, though. So they're going to have a familiar name, a familiar face that I'm sure you recognize in 7-footer, 5th-year center Steven Crowl. He feels like he's been there every bit of those 5 years. So I'm sure you'll remember him from some battles in the past. They still do have that plotting element. I shouldn't say plotting element. They just have size. They have some size with this 7-footer. Wisconsin will always have size. That's part of, what Wisconsin basketball is. So they have some size with Crowl inside, and they have some size with a 6'11" sophomore Nolan Winter, but it's Tonje and it's Blackwell. Those are the two names to know. Those are the two guys who can torch you on any given night, and those are the two guys that make this Wisconsin offense run. And this Wisconsin offense is interesting because what they really do is they're super efficient analytically offense. They rely on the three-point line and they rely on the free throw line. They're 28th nationally in three-point rate, and they shoot it really well. They shoot just over 36% as a team. They also have the best team free throw percentage in the country at just over 85%. So you don't want to get into a free throw contest with these guys, or at least you don't want to send them to the line because they are going to make you pay there. Tonje is one of the best at that. He's 50th nationally among all players in free throw rate at getting to the free throw line. And once he gets there, he shoots 92.5%. It's basically automatic, and he shoots just under 40% from beyond the arc. So those are the guys that Maryland is going to have to key on. Maryland is going to have to find a way to keep those guys out of the lane, to keep them off the stripe, and to make life hard on them when it comes to shooting the three. And one of the best ways Maryland can do that, in my opinion, is to force turnovers. When Wisconsin doesn't have the ball, when they're turning the ball over, obviously they can't score. I know it's not rocket science, but it's true. When Wisconsin is turning the ball over, they're not getting a shot up, they're not getting into the free throw line, and that's huge. And when you look at what Maryland has done this year, the 20% turnover rate number has really been the magic number for them. Against power conference opponents, Maryland's 5-0 when forcing a defensive turnover rate of 20% or more. They're 4-0 in conference play, and they're 1-0 in non-conference play. They did it against Syracuse. Now, in the other 8 games where they forced less than 20% turnover rate, they're 3-5, 2-4 in conference, and 1-1 in non-conference play. That win was against Villanova. The loss to Marquette. And even in those wins, they were closer to, or at least in some of them, closer to that 20%. Against Nebraska, that was one of those 3 wins. Well, they were at 19.3%. Against Villanova, they were at 16.1%. That 20% number, though, it seems like it's key. 5-0 when Maryland forces a defensive turnover rate of 20% or more against power conference opponents. The best way to keep a really good team from scoring is to not let them get shots up. I think turnovers, like it's always going to be for this Maryland team, is really going to be a key against this Wisconsin team that can light it up at any moment. Now, I want to stick defensively for a second because I'm thinking about this game. I'm thinking about these guys, Tonje and Blackwell, and I'm wondering, is this a game where we see more Tafara Gapare and Jordan Geronimo down low? Because I think switchability is going to be really important in this one. Having long, athletic, mobile guys who, you can switch. You can make sure you are switching everything. You are not having to play kind of unique pick and roll coverages. You're not having to, you don't have that risk of kind of getting lost in your coverage. In basketball, if you can switch the pick and roll, that's the absolute easiest way to defend it. So I wonder, do we see more lineups where it's either Julian Reese and Tafara Gapare, Derek Queen and Jordan Geronimo, rather than Reese and Queen always together? Clearly, Reese and Queen together is by far the best offensive lineup. But defensively, and Julian Reese, don't get me wrong, Julian Reese, really, really good defensively this season. I grabbed some numbers on that, actually, that I didn't get to call out yet, but Reese is 3rd in the league in rebounds per game, and nobody's actually grabbed more offensive rebounds in the entire Big Ten than Julian Reese. So Reese has been huge, and Reese is a good defender, so don't get me wrong there, but I just think about that switchability aspect of things, and I wonder if this might be a game where we see Jordan Geronimo more, where we see Tafara Gapare more, when you want to make sure you have a really switchable lineup defensively. Now, one of the other things that I looked at when I looked at the offensive side of things, and defense is Wisconsin's weakness. That's where they can be had. Well, they lost a game just last week to UCLA, 85-83 out in Westwood. And Tyler Bilodeau, a guy that we saw go to battle with Julian Reese just a few weeks ago in College Park, he had a really nice game. He put up 16 points. And Ade Mara, the 7'3" reserve center, came off the bench for UCLA, and he put up 22 points for the Bruins in the win over Wisconsin. You see numbers like that, and you think, okay, maybe Maryland's bigs can have a really big day. We saw what they did just in the last week against Illinois. Could this be a big opportunity for Julian Reese and Derek Queen? And how does Kevin Willard manage that offensive and defensive side of things? That's a big question mark for me. That's one of the things I'll be watching. How does he manage things in regard to that? Because again, clearly, Reese and Queen on the court together, that's option 1A when you think about it offensively. But how does he keep them fresh? How does he manage that defensively? That will certainly be one of the things that I am watching when I take in this game against the Badgers. And the last key, I got 2 more things here. One more thing. In that UCLA game, when I was looking at some of those numbers when I was watching that game, UCLA had 15 assists on 29 made field goals. I think that's going to be a big key for Maryland in this game, is how well can they move the ball? And I think they've been moving it very well, but it seems like when they have those bad possessions, they're not moving the ball. How well can they move the ball? And then how much can they make Wisconsin move the ball? How much can Maryland just play Wisconsin straight up, avoid doubling? Because Steven Crow, their big man, is a very effective passer. He's a very good passer. So one of the things you want to limit in this game is doubling when you don't have to. And I think Maryland is a team that can play Crow straight up for the most part with Reese, with Queen, and avoid giving him those opportunities to find those open guys, to find those really good three-point shooters that Wisconsin has, to find those guys like Blackwell and Tonje who can get to the basket. So that's a big thing for me is how well can Maryland move the ball? Can Maryland come close to like a 50% assist to made field goal rate? And can they play Wisconsin straight up and not let them have easy passes, not double Steven Crow and let him have easy looks to the shooters on that team? And my final big thing about this game is the crowd. Look, consider this an impassioned plea that if you're listening to this podcast, if you love Maryland basketball, show up to this game. These guys deserve it. These guys, after this road trip, deserve a raucous home crowd. We see how important the home crowd can be in college basketball. We see it night in and night out. We've seen it here in Maryland at College Park, at the Xfinity Center. We've seen what a crowd can do. We've seen time and time again how many times over the years did Maryland not seem like they had the same talent as some of the blue bloods in the ACC and come away with a win. Now, of course, a ton of that credit goes to Gary Williams, goes to the way, the tactician that he was, the motivator that he was, those guys on the court making plays. But I guarantee you ask them, did that home crowd at Coalfield House matter? Did that home crowd at Xfinity Center matter? Comcast Center matter? They would absolutely tell you yes. It matters. It absolutely matters. This Maryland team has a chance to do something really special. This Maryland team is sitting in a good spot. This Maryland team is battling it out for fourth place in the Big Ten right now, and their aspirations are much higher than that. Their aspirations are to do big things in March, to win a Big Ten tournament, to go deep in an NCAA tournament. This team has almost every piece you could ask for. We've seen it. We saw it last week on the road. We saw that dynamic front court. We saw Jacoby Gillespie just morphing in front of our eyes into a lead guy, into a guy you trust at the end of the game, who can really run your offense, can run your team, can put you on his back, can win you a game. If you love Maryland basketball, make your way out to College Park tomorrow night, 7 p.m., for a really big-time game, for a really fun game, for a really high-level college basketball game. These guys went out on the road. They heard the criticism. They heard what everybody had to say about how they can't win on the road. They responded. And right now, if you're a Maryland fan, you should be as hopeful as you've been in a long time about what a individual team can accomplish. Certainly since the 2020 season where the tournament was canceled, this is the Maryland team that has the best chance to make a run in the NCAA tournament. I think it really goes back further to 2010, but certainly since the 2020 season, this is the best team that Maryland has had. Go to College Park. Get to Xfinity Center tomorrow night. The students are going to be back, so that should help a lot. And students, this is a plea to you, a request to you. You make such a big difference. You make a huge difference when you show up, when you're loud, when you yell, when you chant, when you scream. It changes the energy. It's felt like in the last couple games for Maryland, let's exclude the UCLA game, but a bunch of these home games, Minnesota certainly, it felt like the Terps had to bring their own juice. They had to bring their own energy. They had to bring their own motivation. They had to bring their own juice. And that can be a really tough thing to do. And a home crowd, a great home crowd, can get you through some of those rough spots in a game. A great home crowd can just keep that energy level high. It can change the momentum. When things are going well, it can turn a game that's a close game into a blowout. It can get that avalanche rolling. Anybody who has played college basketball will tell you the importance of a home crowd. So this is my plea to you. This Maryland team put it on the line over the last week. They went out, they did what everybody wanted them to do. They got 2 big road wins, and now they're coming home for a big-time game. This team has a lot at stake. This team has a lot on the line. This team has a lot of potential. We've seen it, and now I ask you, be there in College Park on Wednesday night to help get them over the hump. That's the show for today. It was fun. There's nothing better than talking about a couple big-time Terp wins, and I can't wait to be back on Thursday to react to this game, this big-time matchup against Wisconsin. That's the show for today. Until next time, this has been the Route 1 Rundown.